My name is Thomas. I'm 30, and there's a house on Maple Street that's been part of my life for as long as I can remember. It wasn't just a building. It was my grandmother's pride, a place where she raised her kids, where we spent Christmases in front of the fireplace, and where she told me stories on the porch swing when I was small. Every memory worth holding on to had walls built from that house. If you've ever had a place that felt like a part of your identity, like losing it would be losing a piece of yourself, you'll understand what this story means to me. Stick with me, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments, what's the one place in your family you'd fight to protect if someone tried to take it from you? Grandma used to tell me, in her soft but steady voice, "This house will always be in good hands one day, Thomas. You'll take care of it, won't you?" And I always nodded, because even as a kid, I understood the weight of her trust. My parents never talked about it much. They didn't share the same affection for the house, at least not the kind tied to memories. For them, Maple Street was money, equity, value. And my brother, Aaron, well, he saw it as just another stepping stone. Aaron had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong no matter how many times he failed. If I was the steady one, the worker, the planner, Aaron was the dreamer whose dreams everyone else had to pay for. When Grandma passed, I expected grief to bring us together. Instead, it pulled us apart. My parents started speaking in hushed tones. Aaron avoided me, and whenever I asked about the house, my father's answers grew shorter. "The house is being taken care of," he'd say. "Don't worry about it, Thomas." But I did worry, because the way he said it didn't sound like reassurance. It sounded like a door slamming shut. And deep down, something told me the house that had always felt like mine wasn't as safe as Grandma had promised. The weeks after Grandma's funeral were strange. The house on Maple Street stood quiet, its windows shuttered, the porch swing still. I drove by sometimes on my way to work, and each time I did, a hollow ache sat heavy in my chest. It didn't feel right seeing it locked up, lifeless, as if her laughter had been erased along with her presence. I assumed the family would handle it together, that we'd sit down, discuss the future, maybe even share memories in those rooms before deciding what to do. But that conversation never came. Instead, I noticed small things, subtle, but sharp enough to raise suspicion. It started with Aaron. My brother carried himself differently in those weeks. He walked into family dinners with an ease he didn't usually have, a smugness that clung to him like cologne. He was suddenly full of plans. About moving closer to the city, about renovating some property, about finally having space to spread out. Every time he said it, he glanced at me with that smirk he had perfected over the years. The kind that said, "I know something you don't." At first, I brushed it off. Aaron was always scheming, always talking big without backing it up. But then there was my father. Dad had never been a man of many words, but now his silences felt heavier. Whenever I asked about Grandma's estate, his eyes hardened. "It's being handled," he'd say, cutting me off. If I pressed, he would stand, end the conversation, leave the room. My mother tried to smooth it over with forced smiles and talk about anything else, but I saw the way she gripped her glass a little too tightly, the way she avoided my gaze. One evening, I dropped by unannounced. I told myself I was just checking in, but really I wanted answers. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard voices from inside, low, urgent. "He doesn't need to know yet," my father was saying. Aaron's voice followed, sharp with irritation. "Why not? It's already done." My heart thudded. I froze just outside the door, listening. "Because timing matters," Dad said firmly. "The less he knows, the easier this will be." I knocked before they could say more, forcing a casual expression when my father opened the door. His face was tight, his voice clipped. "Thomas, you should have called." I stepped inside, pretending I hadn't heard a word, though the echo of Aaron's smug tone rattled in my chest. Later that night, as I sat in my own living room, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Grief does strange things, I told myself. Maybe they were talking about something else entirely. But deep down I knew the secrecy wasn't about grief. It was about control. A few days later, my suspicion deepened. I stopped by my parents' house again, and on the kitchen table, half buried under a pile of newspapers, I spotted an envelope stamped with the estate lawyer's insignia. My mother swooped in quickly, sliding the envelope away before I could ask. "It's just paperwork," she said lightly. Too lightly. I wanted to demand she show me. I wanted to rip the envelope out of her hands. But instead, I forced myself to smile, to play along. Because if they were hiding something, I couldn't afford to tip my hand too soon. The final straw came when Aunt Margaret, Grandma's sister, called me one evening. Her voice was hesitant, but her words pierced through the fog. "Thomas," she said, "I was surprised when your parents told me the house was being passed to Aaron. I thought, well, your grandmother always spoke about you when she talked about the house. Are you sure that's what her will said?" My throat went dry. "That's what they told me." I managed. A pause. Then her voice, softer. "Your grandmother was very clear, Thomas. That house was yours. She told me herself." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the wall. My parents had lied to my aunt. They had lied to me. And Aaron, smug, confident Aaron, was carrying himself like a man who had already won. But something didn't fit. Grandma wasn't careless. She wouldn't have promised me that house and left me empty-handed. She was deliberate, thoughtful, which meant if there was truth to be found, it was hidden somewhere she trusted me to look. And I intended to find it. The thought gnawed at me for days. Aunt Margaret's voice replayed in my head, her quiet certainty that Grandma had meant the house for me. It wasn't just memory, it was conviction, and I knew her well enough to trust it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many loose ends dangled around the estate. The lawyer had read a version of the will, yes, but I hadn't actually seen the original document myself. My parents had kept everything tight in their grasp, letters, papers, even phone calls about the estate. They controlled the flow of information, and I had accepted it blindly because grief makes you compliant. But grief was fading, and suspicion was sharpening. So one Saturday morning, I drove to Grandma's house. The place was quiet, locked up, but I still had my spare key. She had given it to me years ago, just in case, she'd said, and I had never given it back. As I stood on the porch, the old wood creaking beneath my feet, I felt a wave of guilt for what I was about to do. But I pushed it down. This was my family's house. More importantly, it was hers. Inside, the air smelled the same, lavender, cedar, faintly of the tea she used to brew every evening. Dust covered the furniture, but her presence lingered in the details. The knitted blanket over the couch, the photos lining the hallway, the little dish by the door where she always kept spare change. I went straight to the study. The oak desk sat against the wall, just as it always had. It was heavy, solid, the kind of furniture you don't just buy, you inherit. I remembered sitting on her lap as a child while she wrote letters there, her handwriting neat and deliberate. I pulled open the top drawers, stationery, pens, a stack of bills long since outdated. Nothing unusual. I crouched lower, tugging at the bottom drawer, but it didn't budge. That's when I remembered the key. Weeks earlier, in the attic, I had found an odd brass key on a ring with no clear purpose. At the time, I pocketed it without thinking much of it. Now, staring at the stubborn lock, something clicked. My hand shook as I slid the key into the drawer. It turned with a soft click, smooth as if it had been waiting for me. Inside was a manila envelope, thick and neatly sealed. Across the front, in Grandma's familiar cursive, was one word, Thomas. My chest tightened. I pulled out carefully, sat back on my heels, and opened it. The first page was a letter. "If you're reading this, Thomas, then it means what I feared has come true. I know your parents, and I know how they think. They will try to keep control, even when it is not theirs to have. But this house, it is yours. I promised it to you, and I have put it in writing. Inside this envelope, you will find the true copy of my will, signed and notarized, naming you as the sole beneficiary of the Maple Street house." I blinked hard, my eyes stinging. I turned the page, and there it was, the will. My name printed clearly, her signature at the bottom. The paper felt heavier than anything I had ever held, as if it carried not just ink, but years of her trust in me. And suddenly, all the pieces fit. My parents hadn't just lied. They had orchestrated an entire performance, banking on me never questioning, never digging. They thought I'd accept their version of events because I always had. I folded the documents back into the envelope and slipped it into my jacket. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I locked the drawer again, slid the key back into my pocket, and stood. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Aaron could smirk. My parents could lie, but I held the truth in my hands. The next family gathering was only days away. They thought they'd written me out of the story. But when I showed them this in front of everyone, they would finally understand. The house wasn't theirs. It was mine. Family gatherings after Grandma's passing felt different. They weren't warm or nostalgic anymore. They were tense, calculated, like everyone was waiting to see how the estate would shake out. My parents hosted most of them now, eager to play the role of heads of the family. And Aaron, my brother, always strutted through the house like he already owned it. That Saturday, the dining room table was crowded with relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them sipping wine and listening politely as my father told stories about how much responsibility he had taken on since Grandma's passing. My mother hovered, filling glasses, her smile fixed but sharp at the edges. Aaron sat near the head of the table, his arm draped across the back of his chair. He had that smug look again, the one that always seemed to say you'll never catch up to me. He bragged about plans to renovate, how he'd modernize the old place and make it something valuable again. I stayed quiet at first, eating slowly, listening. The manila envelope weighed heavy in my jacket pocket, its edges pressing against me like a reminder. I'd gone back and forth for days. Should I reveal the truth quietly, with lawyers behind closed doors? Or should I let the family see the betrayal unfold? Grandma's words decided it for me. Don't let them bury the truth. Halfway through dinner, my father raised his glass. To family, he said, his voice thick. And to the Maple Street house. It's staying the family where it belongs, under Aaron's care. Murmurs of approval went around the table. My mother smiled tightly. Aaron smirked. I set my fork down, the scrape of metal against porcelain cutting through the chatter. That's interesting, I said, keeping my voice calm. Because that's not what Grandma's will says. The room went still. Every eye turned toward me. My mother's hand froze halfway to the wine bottle. My father's jaw clenched. Aaron scoffed. What are you talking about? We already went through this. The will was read. You got nothing. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and laid it flat on the table. That's the version you let everyone see. But Grandma left another copy. A signed, notarized copy. And it doesn't leave the house to you. It leaves it to me. Gasps rippled through the table. My aunt leaned forward. Is that true? I slid the document toward her. Read it yourself. She scanned the page, her eyes widening. It's here. Thomas is named. This is official. The whispers started immediately. Cousins murmured to one another. Uncles exchanged sharp looks. The approval that had filled the room moments ago shifted into suspicion. Suspicion aimed at my parents and at Aaron. My father tried to recover. That doesn't mean anything. It's probably outdated. The lawyer. It's dated 6 months before she passed. I cut in. It's the final version. The one you hid. My mother's face drained of color. Michael, don't, she began. Thomas. I corrected firmly, my voice louder now. My name is Thomas, and Grandma trusted me with this. She trusted me because she knew you'd lie. Aaron slammed his hand on the table, his face red. You think anyone's going to believe you? You've always been jealous. This house was meant for me. I leaned in, my voice steady, deliberate. No, I don't. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She left it to me because she didn't trust you, or them, to honor it. The table buzzed with voices now. Relatives demanding answers. Others shaking their heads in disgust. My parents sat frozen, their performance unraveling in front of the very audience they wanted to impress. I sat back, the envelope once again in front of me. For weeks, they had lied. They had let me think I was left with nothing. But here, in this room, with the truth spread out in black and white, the weight shifted. And for the first time, they were the ones left with nothing to say. The silence in the dining room didn't last long. It cracked like glass under the weight of voices rising all at once. My Aunt Linda's voice was the sharpest. "How could you?" she demanded, staring at my parents. "You looked us all in the eye and told us Thomas was left with nothing. You knew that wasn't true." Uncle Robert leaned forward, his jaw tight. "So you forged the story to make Aaron the heir? That's fraud, plain and simple." My cousins whispered among themselves, their gazes flicking between me, Aaron, and my parents. No one was smiling anymore. Aaron slammed his fist against the table again, louder this time. "You don't understand. Grandma loved me. She always said I had potential. She wanted me to have it." I met his gaze evenly. "She wanted the house in good hands. And she knew what you'd do with it, Aaron. You'd sell it, flip it, burn through the money like you always do. She saw it. She knew it. That's why she chose me." My father finally found his voice. "Enough of this," he barked, his face red. "You've embarrassed this family long enough. Whatever piece of paper you dug up, it doesn't change the official will." But his words lacked conviction. He knew it, and so did everyone else. The relatives around the table weren't buying it anymore. They had seen the letter, read Grandma's words, and recognized her handwriting. My mother's shoulders slumped. She pressed a hand to her forehead, muttering, "This wasn't supposed to happen like this." I leaned back in my chair, letting the envelope sit in plain view for all to see. My voice was calm, measured. It happened exactly the way Grandma wanted it. She trusted me to protect her wishes. You tried to erase me, but you couldn't erase her. For the first time in years, I saw doubt flicker in my father's eyes. He had always been the authority, the one who expected obedience without question. But in that moment, stripped of his lies, he looked small. The rest of dinner dissolved into chaos. Some relatives scolded my parents outright. Others turned their attention to me, offering quiet nods of support. Aaron stormed out halfway through, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. My parents sat stiff, faces pale, unable to meet anyone's eyes. When it was finally over, I gathered the documents and slipped them back into my jacket. I didn't need to say more. The truth had already spoken for me. Later that night, I drove to Maple Street. The porch light glowed faintly. The swing creaked in the wind. And for the first time since Grandma's funeral, I felt a strange peace. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air still carried her scent, faint lavender and cedar. I walked through each room slowly, letting the memories wash over me. Christmas mornings, late-night talks, the warmth of her laugh echoing in these walls. This wasn't just a house. It was history. It was love. It was everything she had worked for, preserved not for money, not for status, but for family. And it was mine now, just as she intended. Standing in her study, I touched the oak desk where she had hidden the envelope. My hand lingered on the polished wood. "I kept my promise, Grandma," I whispered. "I'll take care of it. I'll take care of everything." The lies my parents spun had unraveled in front of everyone. The smugness Aaron carried had shattered under the weight of the truth. They wanted me erased, forgotten. But instead, they were the ones left humiliated, their credibility gone. I walked back outside, locking the door behind me. The night air was cool, steady, grounding. For the first time in months, I felt certain of who I was. Not the overlooked son, not the disposable sibling, but the one Grandma had trusted above all. They tried to sell my inheritance behind my back. But in the end, the only thing sold was their integrity. If you've ever had a fight for what someone you loved truly meant to leave you, you know the feeling of walking away with both justice and peace. Subscribe to this channel, hit like, and tell me in the comments, what moment do you think my family realized they couldn't bury the truth anymore?